Hey, special educators. Welcome to Teach, Taskbox, Inspire, the podcast dedicated to making your job as a special education teacher easier by making your instruction more fun for you and your students. Inside each episode, you'll learn how to get the most use out of your task boxes in the classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday from Chalkboard Superhero, a veteran special education teacher passionate about empowering you with purposeful teaching strategies, helpful tips and tricks, and other classroom management tools that will help you thrive in your role. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday, and I have a message today that might hit a little differently. So I'm just going to say it. If you don't love your job anymore, it's okay to pivot. Let me say that again, louder for the people in the back. If you're miserable, burnt out, and dreading Monday, something needs to change. Now, I know that that's not the most sunshine and rainbows message, but I also know May is one of the hardest months in our profession. You're exhausted. You're trying to wrap up IEPs. Behaviors are wild. You're running on fumes, and you're probably asking yourself, can I really do this again next year? And if your answer is honestly, I don't know, then this episode is for you. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. I've talked to so many educators who feel stuck. They've been teaching special education for years. They care deeply about their students. They work long hours, go to every meeting, pour everything they have into this job, and yet they're not happy. But they keep going because they don't want to feel like they're giving up, because they feel guilty, because they think, well, someone has to do it. Here's the truth. You are not meant to live in burnout. Staying in a job you no longer love is noble. It's painful. And you don't have to stay. You are allowed to grow, to change, to want something different. Let me share something I haven't always said out loud. I've had moments, multiple moments, where I thought about leaving special education. Not just switching classrooms or buildings. I mean, seriously asking myself, is this still the right place for me? I've sat in my car after work and cried. I've laid in bed on Sunday night with a knot in my stomach. I've walked into school wondering, how am I supposed to do this for another 10, 15, 20 years? It's not that I didn't care. It's that I cared so much that it hurt. And every time I reached one of those breaking points, I had to reevaluate. Sometimes it's meant switching grade levels. Sometimes it meant taking on a different role. Sometimes it meant saying no to extra committees. And yes, sometimes it meant stepping away from a building or a team that no longer aligned with who I was. And yes, I am talking about either toxic coworkers or toxic administrators or just a plain old toxic building. Sometimes you just need a change. I want you to hear this from me today. You have permission to make a change. If you feel disconnected from the work, if your mental health is suffering, if you're snapping at your family when you go home or waking up with anxiety every morning, it might be time to pivot. And that pivot can look a million different ways. Maybe you're in 5th grade and you're like, you know what? I'm going to try 1st grade. Let me try a different grade level. Maybe you're transferring to a different school or a different building or a different district. Maybe you're shifting into co-teaching versus, self-contained class, which is exactly what I did. Maybe you become an instructional coach or behavioral specialist instead of being in the classroom. Maybe you step into curriculum writing or therapy or administration. Or yes, even leaving education altogether. Your skills are valuable in so many spaces. You don't have to stay in that place that drains you just because that's where you started. All right, so let's talk about the signs it might be time to make a change. If you're unsure whether this episode is really speaking to you, here's a few signs I've seen in myself or maybe in others. You feel resentment towards your students or your staff, your coworkers, or just the school more days than not. You dread coming to work, not just because it's hard, but it just feels meaningless. You fantasize about quitting more than once a week. You don't recognize yourself anymore. You're anxious, you're short-tempered, or you're withdrawn. You feel like your passion is gone and you just keep getting through the day. Friend, if any of those hit home, it's worth pausing. It's worth exploring. Not judging yourself, just noticing and giving yourself the space to ask, what do I really need, right? Sit down and really think about that. And change doesn't equal failure. Let's squash that big lie right now. Leaving your role doesn't mean you failed. We put so much pressure on ourselves in education to be the martyrs, to push through for the kids, to put everyone else's needs before our own. But if you're operating from a place of constant depletion, how are you supposed to show up for your students in a way that they deserve? Doing what's best for you is not selfish. It's necessary. And let me say this, you are still a good teacher, even if you walk away. But what if you still love teaching, but something feels off? Maybe you're not ready to leave teaching. Maybe you still love working with students, but something about your current setup isn't really working. That's totally valid. You don't have to burn it all down to make a change. Maybe what you need is a new principal or a different caseload or to teach a different population, like moving from middle school to elementary or self-contained to resource. Sometimes all it takes is a new environment to reignite your fire. So ask around, explore openings, talk to trusted colleagues or mentors. You have options, even if it doesn't feel right now. And let me just say this, you will come across colleagues who might say, oh, this person, they just talk crap about people all the time. And that annoys me, but they're just judgy people, especially if you find coworkers who have been in the same position for a long period of time. But let's say me, who goes to a new building and they realize, oh, you've been in how many different positions? Or you've been in how many different states? Or how many principals have you had? Or how many, it doesn't matter. If you're not feeling that building or feeling the passion anymore, the best thing you can do for you and your students is to move. And those people are judgy people and you just have to ignore them like I do. So here's something that you can try later today when you have 5 quiet minutes. I want you to write down the parts of your job that light you up. Then write down the parts that leave you feeling drained, feeling defeated, feeling empty. What patterns do you see? Sometimes just putting it on paper gives you clarity. Maybe you need more of what lights you up. Maybe you need less of what's draining. Either way, it's information, and information leads to action and decisions. And you're not alone. If you're thinking about making a change, I want you to know you're not alone. There are thousands and thousands of educators who have pivoted, redefined their careers, or found joy again. Some stayed in education, some didn't, but all of them stopped settling for misery. So if you're struggling right now, I see you. If you're unsure what the next school year holds, I get it. If you just needed someone to say, it's okay to want more, let this be that moment. All right, to the teachers listening right now who's questioning it all, this is your permission slip. You don't have to prove your worth by staying in a role that no longer fits. You've already given so much. You've made a difference. And you're allowed to move forward in a way that honors who you are now, not when you were when you first took this job. Whether you stay, shift, or start fresh entirely, I'm cheering for you. You're not broken. You're evolving. And that's beautiful. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I know this was a bit deeper than usual, but I hope it gave you something to think about and maybe the push you needed to reflect on your next steps. If this episode spoke to you at all, share it with a teacher friend who really needs this message too. And as always, you can always find me on Instagram. Just DM me and ask me any questions about the ways that I pivoted in my own career. That's all I have for you guys today. Until next time, guys. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I hope you've gained some tips and motivation to fuel your week ahead. If you're ready to explore more strategies for empowering your students as independent learners, be sure to dive into my free training at chalkboardsuperhero.com/training. And don't keep all this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with your special education teacher friends who could use some motivation and inspiration. One more thing before you go. If you're finding this podcast helpful and want to show support, head to Apple Podcasts and leave your rating and review. Until next time, keep teaching, taskboxing, and inspiring.